I worked for the church. In 1 year, I found 5 nuns pregnant. What they confessed to me is shocking. I was standing there in the small infirmary of the convent when Sister Teresa looked into my eyes with tears streaming down her pale face and told me words I will never forget. She was 28 years old, had been a nun for only 5 years, and her hands were trembling as she held the positive pregnancy test. She was the 5th one, the 5th nun in 1 year. And when she confessed to me who the father was, when she told me what was really happening behind those walls that everyone considered sacred, my world collapsed. Because it wasn't what you think. It wasn't even close to what anyone could have imagined. The truth was much darker, much more complex, and much more devastating than any sex scandal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me tell you how it all started, how I became the keeper of the most terrible secret a religious institution could hide. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old today, but when this story began, I was 36. I was a qualified nurse with 15 years of experience in public hospitals in Philadelphia. I had seen everything: births, deaths, diseases, miracles. I thought I was prepared for anything. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I would discover working for the church. It all started in the fall of 2019. My husband had just lost his job, we had 2 teenage children to support, and I was desperately looking for a second job to make ends meet. That's when I saw the ad. The Convent of Our Lady of Mercy in the outskirts of Philadelphia was looking for a part-time nurse to assist elderly nuns and manage the small convent infirmary. The pay was good, the hours were flexible, and the convent was only 20 minutes from my home. It seemed perfect. The convent was a huge structure built in the 19th century with high, thick walls, manicured gardens, and an air of peace that seemed to envelop everything. It housed about 60 nuns, most of them elderly, but there were also about 15 young novices between 25 and 35 years old. Mother Superior Catherine, a 72-year-old woman with penetrating blue eyes and a kind smile, welcomed me warmly. She showed me the infirmary, a spacious and well-equipped room with 2 beds, cabinets full of medicines, and everything necessary to handle basic emergencies. My task was simple: come 3 times a week to check on elderly nuns who had chronic health problems, manage medications, and be available for any emergency. Nothing complicated. Nothing that I could have imagined would lead me to where it led me. The first months were quiet. I cared for the elderly nuns, checked blood pressure, managed diabetics, helped with physical therapy. The nuns were kind, polite, always grateful for my help. There was an atmosphere of serenity in the convent that I found almost therapeutic after the chaos of public hospitals. But then came February 2020. I remember the exact date, February 15th. It was a Saturday morning. I was checking the medicine supplies in the infirmary when Sister Claire knocked on the door. She was 32 years old, blonde hair hidden under her veil, green eyes, and an expression of absolute panic on her face. She closed the door behind her and told me in a trembling voice that she needed to talk to me privately. She told me she had a problem she couldn't share with Mother Superior or any other nun. When she finally found the courage to tell me, she whispered so softly that I had to lean in to hear. She had missed her period for 2 months. She had morning sickness. Her breasts were swollen and tender. She thought she was pregnant. My first instinct was disbelief. A nun pregnant? How was that possible? But then the nurse in me took over. I asked her if she wanted to take a test. She nodded, with tears beginning to fall. I did the test there, in the small bathroom of the infirmary. We waited together those interminable 3 minutes. When I saw the 2 pink lines appear, my heart sank. Sister Claire collapsed. She sat on the cold floor and cried like I had never seen anyone cry. When she finally managed to calm down enough to speak, I expected her to confess to an illicit relationship, a moment of weakness, a sin that now tormented her. But what she told me was very, very different. She told me she had not had sexual intercourse. She told me she was still a virgin, or at least thought she was. She told me something that at first I couldn't understand, something that seemed impossible, absurd. But when she explained it better, when she gave me the details, I understood she was telling the truth. And that truth terrified me. 6 months earlier, Sister Claire had participated in what had been described to her as a special spiritual retreat. She had been selected along with 5 other young nuns for this retreat that was held in an isolated part of the convent she had never seen before. She had been told it was an honor to be chosen, that this retreat would bring them closer to God in ways they had never experienced. During this retreat, which lasted 3 days, the nuns were subjected to what were described to them as ancient spiritual ceremonies. They were given special drinks that made them feel relaxed, almost in a trance state. During these ceremonies, there were men present, men wearing religious robes but whom Sister Claire had never seen before. She was told these were special monks, spiritual healers, who would help them reach a higher level of communion with God. What happened during those ceremonies, Sister Claire didn't remember clearly. It was as if she had been in a dream, or in an altered state of consciousness. She remembered lying down, she remembered hands on her, she remembered strange sensations, but everything was confused, blurred. When she woke up afterward, she was told she had had a profound spiritual experience, that she had been blessed in a special way. As Sister Claire told me all this, sitting on the cold floor of the infirmary with tears streaming down her face, I felt an anger growing inside me that I had never felt before. What she was describing to me was not a spiritual ceremony, it was abuse. It was sexual violence masked as a religious ritual. It was something horrible, evil, criminal. I asked her why she hadn't spoken up before. She told me she had been told that everything that happened during the retreat was sacred, secret, that she should never talk about it with anyone. That if she did, she would commit a very serious sin and would be expelled from the order. She had also been told that if she had strange experiences after the retreat, like vivid dreams or physical sensations, they were simply part of the spiritual process. I told her we needed to go to the police immediately, but she grabbed my arm with a strength I didn't know she had and begged me not to. She told me she didn't know who those men were, that she had never seen them before and hadn't seen them since. She told me Mother Superior had organized the retreat, but maybe she didn't know what was really happening. She told me she needed time to think, to understand what to do. Against every instinct I had, I agreed to give her time, but I also told her I couldn't keep this secret if other nuns were in danger. She assured me the retreat had been a one-time event, that it wouldn't be repeated. But she was wrong. Oh, how wrong she was. 2 weeks later, it was February 28th, Sister Angela came to me with the exact same problem. 35 years old, a nun for 10 years, missed period, nausea, thought she was pregnant. I did the test. Positive. And when I asked if she had participated in a special spiritual retreat 6 months earlier, her face turned white as a sheet. She had been there too. She had drunk those drinks too. She also had confused memories of that night. She had also been threatened not to speak. Now I had 2 pregnant nuns, both claiming they had never had consensual sexual relations, both who had been drugged and abused during what had been presented as a spiritual retreat. And I knew I had to do something. But what? If I went to the police, I would need evidence. And what evidence did I have? 2 positive pregnancy tests and the testimonies of 2 nuns who admitted they didn't clearly remember what had happened. Who were the men involved? We didn't know. Where exactly had it happened? Somewhere in the convent. But where? Who else was involved? We didn't know. I decided to talk to Mother Superior. It was a huge risk, because if she was involved, she could cover everything up, and I would lose my only chance to discover the truth, but I had to try. I met with her in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. I told her I needed to talk to her about a serious and delicate matter. When I told her 2 nuns were pregnant, I saw something flash in her eyes. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't shock. It was fear. She asked me who the nuns were. I told her. She asked me how I knew. I told her. Then she remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her words chilled my blood. She told me she knew about the retreat. She told me she had organized it herself, on orders from someone much higher up in the church hierarchy. She told me she had been told it was for a higher spiritual purpose, that the selected nuns had been chosen because they were pure, devout, and would be blessed. She told me she hadn't been told exactly what would happen during the retreat, but they had assured her it was all approved, all holy. When she started to suspect something was wrong, when some of the nuns who had participated in the retreat began to show signs of emotional distress, she had asked questions. She was told to be quiet, not to interfere, that everything was part of a bigger plan she couldn't understand. She was also told, in very clear terms, that if she spoke out, the order would be closed, all the nuns would be dispersed, and she would lose everything she had worked for 50 years. Mother Superior was 72 years old. She had dedicated her entire adult life to that convent. She was terrified, paralyzed between her moral duty to protect her nuns and the fear of losing everything, and so she had chosen silence. But now silence was no longer possible, because 2 nuns were pregnant. and she didn't know what to do. I told her we had to go to the authorities. She begged me not to. She told me she would talk to the people who had organized the retreat, that she would try to fix things, to help the nuns. She asked me to give her a week. Again, against every instinct, I agreed. But this time, I set clear limits. 1 week. And if after 1 week there were no concrete results, I would go to the police myself, with or without her support. That week was one of the longest of my life. I continued working at the convent, caring for the elderly nuns, pretending everything was normal. But inside me a storm was raging. Every time I saw Sister Claire or Sister Angela, I saw the fear in their eyes. Every night I went home and hugged my children tighter, grateful they were safe. Then 5 days later, something happened that changed everything. Sister Maria, 27 years old, came to the infirmary. She also thought she was pregnant. She had also participated in the retreat. Positive test. 3 nuns. 2 days later, Sister Frances, 30 years old, retreat, pregnant, 4 nuns. And then, the day before the deadline of the week, I had given Mother Superior, Sister Teresa. 28 years old, retreat, pregnant, 5 nuns. 5 pregnant nuns. All had participated in the same retreat 6 months earlier. All had been drugged. All had been abused. And now all were carrying children they hadn't chosen to conceive. When I went back to Mother Superior with these numbers, the woman collapsed. She cried like a child, saying she had failed, that she hadn't protected her spiritual daughters, that she should have been braver. She told me she had talked to the people above, but they had only told her to handle the situation discreetly, to send the nuns away quietly, to make the problem disappear. But I couldn't let the problem disappear. I couldn't let these monsters, whoever they were, go unpunished. And most importantly, I couldn't abandon these 5 young women who now faced impossible decisions. That evening, I gathered all 5 nuns in the infirmary. It was risky, but they needed to talk to each other. They needed to know they weren't alone. When they entered and realized they were all in the same situation, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then Sister Claire started to cry, and then another. And then all of them. They hugged each other, cried together, and in that moment of shared pain, they also found a strength that none of them had alone. Together, they began to talk, to share what they remembered. And as they talked, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. They all remembered the same strange-tasting drink. They all remembered feeling dazed, out of body. They all remembered the same room, with candles and incense. They all remembered male voices chanting in Latin. They all remembered waking up hours later, confused and sore. But there was more. Sister Maria remembered seeing a phone. Someone was recording videos during the ceremonies. Sister Frances remembered a symbol on the wall, a symbol she had never seen before in any traditional Catholic iconography. Sister Teresa remembered a voice she thought she recognized but wasn't sure. We had enough to go to the police, but before doing so, I needed to understand one thing. Who in the church hierarchy knew? How high up did this conspiracy go? Because if we went to the police without having this information, the people truly responsible could escape, covering their tracks. So I made a decision that could have cost me dearly. I decided to investigate myself. I had access to the convent, I knew the layout of the place, and the nuns now trusted me. With their help, I could discover where exactly it had happened and maybe find physical evidence. The following weeks were a nightmare of fear and tension. At night, when the convent was silent, the nuns guided me through corridors I had never seen, into parts of the convent that were normally closed. We were looking for the room they remembered from the ceremonies. It was Sister Angela who found it. It was in the basement of the convent, behind a door that looked like a simple storage room, but that hid a staircase that went even further down. The room was there, exactly as they had described it. Ancient stone walls, an altar in the center, candelabras, and on the wall that symbol Sister Frances had remembered. But the most important thing, the thing that made my heart beat so hard I thought I would faint, was what we found in a cabinet hidden behind a false wall. There were bottles with labels written in Latin, full of what appeared to be the drink they had given to the nuns. There were ceremonial robes. And there was a video camera. I took the video camera with trembling hands. It was a professional camera, expensive. I checked it. There was a memory card inside. I didn't dare look at it there. I took it, along with one of the bottles and one of the robes, and hid them in my bag. That night, I went home and did what I should have done weeks earlier. I called the police. But before I did, I watched what was on the camera's memory card. I had to know. I had to be sure. What I saw made me vomit. They were videos of the ceremonies, videos of the 5 nuns drugged, unconscious, being abused by men in ceremonial robes, videos that clearly showed the faces of these men. And I recognized one of those faces. It was Bishop Daniel Morrison, the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, a man I had seen on television, who had celebrated masses I had attended, who was considered one of the pillars of the church in our region. And he was there, in those videos, participating in what could only be described as a group sexual violence ritual, masked as a religious ceremony. I called the police. When they arrived, I handed over everything. The videos, the bottle, the robe, my detailed testimonies, the statements that the 5 nuns had agreed to give. The police officers were shocked. One of them, an older detective who had seen everything in his career, told me it was the most disturbing case he had ever worked on. The investigations that followed were swift and devastating. Analysis of the drink revealed a cocktail of sedative and hallucinogenic drugs. The videos were authenticated. The men in the videos were identified. In addition to Bishop Morrison, there were 3 other high-ranking priests and 2 laymen who apparently were part of some kind of cult or secret group within the church. The complete confessions of the 5 nuns, together with the physical evidence and videos, built an irrefutable case. Arrests were made 2 weeks after I contacted the police. The case exploded in the national media. Bishop arrested for ritual sexual violence on nuns. The headlines were shocking, and the horror they described was real. But what the newspaper headlines didn't capture was the pain of the 5 women at the center of it all. As the case proceeded through the legal system, they had to face impossible decisions. All 5 were now in their 3rd month of pregnancy. What would they do? Sister Claire decided to have an abortion. She couldn't, she said, carry forward a pregnancy that was the result of such a violation. The church, of course, was opposed, but she was determined. She left the order and underwent the procedure. Today, she lives with her sister in another city, trying to rebuild her life. Sister Angela decided to continue the pregnancy. She said that however horrible the way the baby was conceived, she couldn't punish an innocent life. She gave birth to a baby girl 6 months later. She also left the order. Today, she raises her daughter alone, with the support of her family. She told me that every time she looks at her daughter, she sees only the child, not the circumstances of her conception. Sister Maria chose adoption. She carried the pregnancy to term, but gave the baby up for adoption to a family she knew through the church, a couple who couldn't have children of their own. She stayed in the order, although in a different convent. She wrote to me a few months ago saying she's finding peace in continued service, but there are days when she wonders if she made the right choice. Sister Frances had a miscarriage in the 4th month. It was devastating for her, though part of her felt it might be a relief. She left the order and now works as a counselor for abuse victims, using her experience to help others. Sister Teresa, the 5th, the one who had confessed to me last, had a complicated pregnancy. She developed preeclampsia and had to give birth prematurely at 7 months. The baby, a boy, survived but with health problems. Teresa kept him. She left the order and today works as a teacher while raising her son. She told me he is her redemption, proof that even from the darkest things light can emerge. The trial against Bishop Morrison and the others lasted 2 years. All were convicted. Bishop Morrison received 25 years in prison. The others received sentences between 15 and 20 years, but the criminal convictions were only a small part of justice. The real justice was in the courage of those 5 women who spoke up, who testified, who didn't let evil prevail in silence. Mother Superior Catherine left the order shortly after the trial. She now lives in retirement, tormented by guilt for not protecting her nuns when they needed it most. I visited her once. She told me she prays every day for forgiveness, but she knows some things cannot be forgiven, only endured. The convent of Our Lady of Mercy was closed. The building is now empty, a silent monument to the horrors that had taken place there. The elderly nuns were transferred to other facilities. I lost my job there, of course, but I didn't care. I had done what I had to do. What still torments me today, 3 years later, is not just the horrors of what happened, it's how easily it could have remained hidden. If Sister Claire hadn't come to me, if I had chosen to ignore, to look away, not to want to know, if Mother Superior had been a bit more effective in keeping the secret, if the nuns had been too terrified to speak. How many other times has this happened? How many other institutions, not just in the church but anywhere there's power without oversight, hide similar secrets? How many other victims suffer in silence because no one is willing to listen, to believe, to act? When I look back on that year, I see moments when I could have chosen differently. I could have ignored the first pregnancy test, told Sister Claire to go to someone else. I could have accepted Mother Superior's assurances that everything would be handled. I could have decided it wasn't my business, that I didn't want to risk my job, my safety, my peace of mind, but I didn't. And I'm grateful I didn't, because those 5 women deserved someone who believed them, who fought for them, who refused to let their pain be swept away as if it had never happened. Today I work again in a public hospital. I go home every evening to my husband and children, grateful for my normal and safe life. But I still keep in touch with the 5 women. We meet once a year, on the anniversary of the day everything came to light. Not to celebrate, there will never be anything to celebrate in this story, but to remember, to honor their courage, to promise each other we will never stop speaking, testifying, making sure the world knows. Sister Claire now goes by just Claire. She cut her hair short and dyed it red, an act of rebellion against years of conformity. She told me she's learning who she is without the veil, without the rules, without the identity she had built as a nun. It's a painful but necessary process. Angela and her daughter live in a small apartment near her family. The girl is 2.5 now. She's beautiful, with curious dark eyes and a smile that lights up the room. Angela showed me photos and videos, proud like any mother. But I also see the shadows in her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking, the weight of secrets she carries that her daughter is too young to understand. Maria has found a different vocation. She remains devout, remains a believer, but has learned to separate faith in God from trust in human institutions. She told me her new convent is different, more open, more careful. But I know she still carries scars that no change of place can completely heal. Frances has become one of the strongest voices in the movement for rights of victims of ecclesiastical abuse. She speaks at conferences, writes articles, testifies before commissions. She has transformed her trauma into a mission. But she also confessed to me during one of our annual meetings that there are nights when she cries herself to sleep, wondering what her life would have been like if that retreat had never happened. Teresa and her son visit me sometimes. The boy is now 3 years old. He has some developmental issues due to premature birth, but he's a sweet and affectionate child. Teresa works tirelessly to give him the best life possible. She told me that every milestone he reaches, every smile, every hug, is a victory against those who tried to destroy everything she was. The Vatican released official statements condemning the actions of Bishop Morrison and the others. They promised reforms, greater oversight, stricter protocols. But promises are easy. Real change requires constant vigilance, requires people willing to speak even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's dangerous. What I learned from all this is that evil thrives in silence. It thrives when good people decide they don't want to be involved, that it's not their problem, that it's too complicated or too dangerous to intervene. It thrives when institutions protect themselves instead of protecting the vulnerable. It thrives when reputation is valued more than truth. But I also learned that courage is contagious. When one person speaks, it gives others the courage to speak. When one person says no more, it creates a space for others to say the same. Sister Claire had the courage to come to me. I had the courage to believe her. Together, we created a space where the other 4 could share their stories. And together, we brought down a wall of secrets that had protected predators. I'm not a hero. I'm just a nurse who did what any decent person should do when faced with evil. I listened, I believed, I acted, but in a world where too often we pretend not to see, even these basic acts become extraordinary. If you're listening to this story and you're carrying a similar secret, if you're suffering in silence, if you think no one will believe you or there's nothing you can do, I tell you this: speak. Find someone you trust and speak, because secrecy is the prison, and truth, however painful, is the key to freedom. There are organizations that can help. There are people who will believe. There are laws that protect. And yes, it will be difficult. It will be painful. There will be moments when you want to give up. But on the other side of that pain is the possibility of a life that isn't defined by what was done to you, but by how you chose to respond. The 5 women at the center of this story are still healing. Perhaps they will heal forever, carrying scars that will never completely fade. But they're living. They're loving. They're building lives that have meaning and purpose. And that is a triumph that no monster can take from them. As for me, this experience changed me profoundly. It taught me that good and evil are not abstract concepts, but concrete realities that exist in the world and require concrete responses from us. It taught me that institutions, no matter how sacred or respected, are made of people, and people are capable of both great goodness and great evil. It also taught me the importance of community. I couldn't have done anything alone. The 5 nuns needed each other. I needed them. We needed the brave police who took our accusations seriously. We needed the journalists who reported the story honestly. We needed ordinary people who, when they heard what had happened, refused to look away. Evil is powerful, but the community of good people who refuse to accept it is more powerful. This is the lesson I carry with me every day. There are still moments when I wake up in the middle of the night, remembering those videos I saw, remembering the faces of those 5 young women when they realized what had happened to them, remembering the feeling of helplessness before I decided to act. In those moments, I have to remind myself that we made a difference, that we stopped the predators, that we saved future victims. Because that's the other thing that keeps me up at night. How many times had it happened before? How many other women, in other convents, in other institutions, had suffered the same thing and never spoken? How many had carried that secret to their graves? During the trial, Bishop Morrison's defense attorney tried to argue that what happened was consensual, that it was part of ancient spiritual practices that we, in our modern ignorance, didn't understand. It was revolting to hear these defenses, but even more revolting was knowing that in the past, before the 5 nuns had spoken, before the videos were found, these defenses might have worked. The perpetrator would have remained protected by his position, his connections, the automatic respect people give to religious figures. But not this time. This time, truth prevailed. And that's a victory that goes beyond this specific case. It's a signal that times are changing, that more and more people are refusing to accept that institutional power is an excuse for abuse. The reforms the Church promised after this scandal included new protocols for spiritual retreats, greater oversight of activities involving young nuns, and a more accessible reporting system for abuse. But reforms are just paper if they're not applied with constant vigilance, and vigilance requires all of us to do our part. If you're parents, teach your children that no institution, no matter how respected, is above questions. Teach them their body is theirs, that they have the right to say no, that they should always tell you if someone makes them uncomfortable, no matter who that person is. If you're part of religious institutions, be vigilant. Ask questions. Don't accept evasive answers. If you see something that seems strange, investigate. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. An institution's reputation is less important than the safety of people within it. If you're professionals working with vulnerable populations, as I was, take your responsibilities seriously. When someone comes to you with a story of abuse, believe them, even if the story seems impossible. Even if the accused is someone respected, especially if the accused is someone respected, because those are exactly the predators who are hardest to stop. And if you're survivors, know this, you're not alone. Your story matters. Your pain is real, and you don't have to carry that weight alone. There are people who will listen to you, who will believe you, who will fight with you. 3 years after these events, I look back and see how a single moment of courage, when Sister Claire knocked on the infirmary door that Saturday morning, triggered a chain of events that brought justice, saved future lives, and gave voice to those who had been silenced. But I also see how precarious it all was. How easily it could have gone differently. If I had been afraid, if Mother Superior had been stronger in her threats, if the police hadn't taken the case seriously, if the media had decided the story was too scandalous to publish. This reminds me that justice is not automatic. It's not inevitable. It requires people who choose to fight for it, even when it's difficult, even when it's scary, even when it would seem easier to look away. Today, when I pass by the closed convent, when I see those high walls that once hid terrible horrors, I think about all the institutions in the world that still hide similar secrets. I think about all the victims who still suffer in silence, and I commit myself again to do my part, however small, to bring light to those dark places. Because this isn't just the story of 5 nuns who got pregnant, it's the story of 5 courageous women who refused to allow their trauma to be hidden. It's the story of a community of people, myself included, who chose to stand on the side of truth even when it was uncomfortable. It's the story of how good can prevail over evil, not because good is more powerful, but because good people choose to act. And that's the challenge I leave to anyone who's listening. When you're faced with evil, even if it's masked by respectability, even if it's protected by power, even if it seems impossible to fight, choose to act, choose to believe victims, choose to speak, choose to be uncomfortable. Because in those moments of choice, in those moments when we decide whether to look away or face the difficult truth, we define not only who we are as individuals, but what kind of society we want to be. Do we want to be a society that protects the powerful, or one that protects the vulnerable? Do we want to be a society where secrets are kept for convenience, or where truth is valued even when it's painful? The 5 women at the center of this story have already made their choice. They chose courage over fear, truth over secrecy, justice over convenience. And in making that choice, they changed not only their lives, but created waves that continue to expand, inspiring other survivors to speak, encouraging other witnesses to act, challenging institutions to do better. This is their legacy, and I hope it becomes ours too.